Welcome to today's session on sample and hypothesis, a pivotal chapter in biostatistics and research methodology. In the exciting world of pharmaceuticals, these concepts are your navigational tools, guiding you through the vast ocean of data. Today we'll delve into the art and science of sampling, a technique that saves you from drowning in an overwhelming sea of data by providing a manageable subset to work with. We'll also unravel the mystery of hypothesis testing, a method that allows us to make educated guesses about our data. We'll explore the different types of sampling methods and understand how to choose the right one for our study. We'll also learn how to test our hypotheses and interpret the results. Whether you're running clinical trials or evaluating patient data, these tools are your keys to unlocking meaningful insights. Let's begin with sampling. Imagine you have a giant batch of medicine capsules. It's impractical to test them all, right? That's where sampling comes in. It's a bit like baking a cake. You don't need to eat the whole thing to know if it's good. You take a bite, or in this case, a sample. Sampling is the process of selecting a subset of individuals from a statistical population to estimate characteristics of the whole population. In the realm of biostatistics, sampling is vital. It's how we gather data for our research, whether we're exploring new medicines, analyzing patient recovery rates, or studying the spread of diseases. Now imagine you're in a room filled with 1,000 balloons, each representing a data point in your population. You need to select a sample. How would you go about it? Would you just grab the first few you see? Or would you close your eyes and pick at random? In biostatistics, we opt for the latter. We choose our balloons or data points randomly. This is to ensure that each data point has an equal chance of being selected. This way, our sample is more likely to be representative of the entire population. It's a bit like drawing names from a hat. If you're choosing a team for a game, you wouldn't want to be accused of bias, so you put all the names in a hat and draw them out one by one. Each person has an equal chance of being chosen, and that ensures fairness. The same principle applies to sampling in biostatistics. We want our sample to be a fair representation of the whole population. We aim for a sample that mirrors the entire batch, capturing its diversity and complexity. Sampling is the foundation of our research. It's the first step in our journey of discovery. It sets the stage for everything that follows, from hypothesis testing to data analysis. Each capsule must have an equal chance of being chosen, ensuring our sample mirrors the entire batch. So let's dive deeper and explore the different ways we can sample in biostatistics. There are many ways to sample: simple random sampling, stratified, or even systematic sampling. These methods are like the different brushes an artist uses, each with its own unique stroke and purpose. Let's start with simple random sampling. As the name suggests, it's the most straightforward approach, where each individual in a population has an equal chance of being selected. Picture this as drawing names from a hat. It's simple, but sometimes simplicity is all we need. Next, we have stratified sampling. Imagine your population is a fruit salad. It's made up of different fruits: strawberries, oranges, and apples. In stratified sampling, you'd sample from each of these strata to ensure all groups are represented. So, you'll have a little bit of strawberry, a slice of orange, and a piece of apple in your sample. This method is fantastic when you want to highlight the differences or similarities within diverse groups. Then there's systematic sampling. Think of it as a skip and pick method. Let's say you decide to pick every fifth name on a list. You've just used systematic sampling. It's a neat tactic when your population is large and you need a quick way to get a representative sample. Cluster sampling is another method to consider when dealing with large populations. In this case, the population is divided into clusters, and a few clusters are randomly selected for sampling. It's like picking a few trees from an orchard instead of picking individual apples. Now, ever heard of convenient sampling? It's as easy as it sounds. You pick samples that are easy to reach. It's like picking apples from the lower branches of a tree. While it may not be the best method for all studies, it has its moments when quick data collection is the priority. Lastly, there's quota sampling. It's similar to stratified sampling, but here, you decide on a quota for each group. For example, if you want equal representation of men and women in your sample, you'd set a quota for each. The choice of sampling method depends on your study design and what you're trying to discover. So choose wisely, because your sample is the mirror that reflects your entire population. Now onto hypothesis testing. This is our scientific way of making inferences about our data. Hypothesis testing is like a courtroom trial for your data. You have a claim, or null hypothesis, which states there's no effect or difference in your data. This null hypothesis is like the defendant in our trial, presumed innocent until proven guilty. But, just like in a trial, we have an alternative viewpoint. The alternative hypothesis is what we suspect might actually be true. This hypothesis suggests there is an effect or a difference in our data. It's like the prosecution presenting evidence to contradict the null hypothesis. However, we can't just accept the alternative hypothesis because it sounds better or fits our expectations. We need evidence. And in the world of biostatistics, that evidence comes from our data, collected through careful sampling. Once we've set our hypotheses, we put them to the test. This involves using statistical tests, like the t-test or chi-square test, to analyze our sample data. These tests help us calculate something called a p-value, a crucial number that tells us how likely we would see the data we have if the null hypothesis were true. If the p-value is small, typically less than 5%, it's unlikely our data would occur if the null hypothesis were true. In this case, we reject the null hypothesis, and our alternative hypothesis stands. But remember, we're dealing with probabilities and uncertainty here. We could make mistakes. We might reject a true null hypothesis, which is a type 1 error, or we might fail to reject a false null hypothesis, a type 2 error. These are the risks we take in hypothesis testing. And that's it. That's how we use hypothesis testing to make inferences about our data. We start with a null hypothesis, consider an alternative, gather and analyze our data, and then make a decision. But no matter what, we always remember the potential for error. Our alternative hypothesis is what we suspect might actually be true. The fun begins when we put these hypotheses to the test. Picture this: you're in a courtroom of biostatistics, and your hypotheses are the defendant and the plaintiff. It's your job to present evidence, and the jury is the statistical test. We start with our null hypothesis in the dock. This hypothesis believes in the status quo, that there's no difference, no change, no effect. It's the skeptic in the room, demanding substantial evidence to be convinced otherwise. On the other side, we have the alternative hypothesis. The challenger, the one daring to suggest there might be a difference, an effect, a change. It's the optimist, the believer, the one hoping the evidence will go in its favor. Now let's talk about this evidence. In our biostatistical courtroom, the evidence comes in the form of data from our sample. It's a collection of facts, figures, and observations that we've painstakingly gathered, all ready to be presented. To dissect this evidence, we use statistical tests. There's a variety of them, each with its own strengths and weaknesses, like the t-test or chi-square. These tests help us crunch the numbers and extract meaning from our data. The result of this number crunching is a p-value. This little number is the key to our decision. It tells us how likely we are to get our sample data if the null hypothesis is true. If this p-value is small, we say it's statistically significant, and we have enough evidence to reject the null hypothesis. But remember, statistics is a game of probability. There's always a chance of making a mistake. We could reject the null hypothesis when it's actually true, known as a type 1 error, or we could fail to reject it when it's false, known as a type 2 error. In this courtroom, our goal is to make a fair judgment. We want to minimize these errors and ensure our evidence is strong enough to support our decision. Using statistical tests like the t-test or chi-square, we calculate a p-value to help us decide whether to reject our null hypothesis. It's a process of careful analysis, thoughtful interpretation, and above all, a commitment to discovering the truth. Finally, we interpret our results. The beauty of hypothesis testing lies in its ability to provide clear, actionable insights. Did our sample evidence support our hypothesis? Or do we need more data? This is the moment of truth. It's much like solving a mystery. Each piece of data, a clue, leading us closer to the answer. Remember, while interpreting results, it's essential to be aware of possible errors. A type 1 error can lead us to reject a true null hypothesis, causing a false alarm. On the other hand, a type 2 error is a missed opportunity, accepting a false null hypothesis. Our aim is to minimize these errors and maximize the power of the test. In the end, it's all about the balance between data, hypothesis, and interpretation. It's a challenging process, but the rewards are immense. Did our sample provide enough evidence to support our hypothesis, or do we need to go back to the drawing board?